What a thoughtful gift, Yasuke. I don't know what to say.
Really? I do not think I have ever seen you quite so tongue-tied.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
What a fucking nick. Ah, Ubisoft. What is there to say about this company that hasn't been said yet? Quite a lot, incidentally, if you add the word coherently to that criteria, something that Murahar simply can't be the second you start telling him to use the bathroom properly. Growing up in the 2000s and 2010s was something really special, something that you really can't replicate, and one thing that you really can't replicate was the feeling of seeing a new Ubisoft game trailer. Back in the day, if you saw the Ubisoft logo at the end of a trailer, it was almost guaranteed that the game was gonna be a banger. Nowadays, however, their stock is worth less than a meal at the McDonald's 10 minutes away from my place. The reality is that I saw the writing on the wall for this more than 5 years ago, but a lot of people didn't. What happened? Well, don't worry, I'm gonna tell you, and like in my Elder Scrolls 6 is gonna disappoint you video, we're gonna go about this in order. Setting our sights back to 2014, we can see Watch Dogs. Now, if you don't remember Watch Dogs, yes, I barely did. It was one of the most hyped games of the new generation of consoles, that being the 8th console generation, PS4, Xbox One, Wii U. It's difficult to describe now, but the hype for this fucking thing was absolutely everywhere. In some ways, it actually sort of beat the hype for GTA 5 on Xbox 360, and it's difficult to compare to something now, but it was actually insane back in the day. The hype was through the roof. Any trailer, any screenshot, any merch that was coming out was instantly eye-catching. The graphical fidelity presented in the game, along with it being a sort of rival to GTA, or at least that's how a lot of people put it, actually got a lot of people interested. At the time, a graphical fidelity of this scale was something that people simply had not seen before. And ironically enough, it would be something we'd struggle to see since, but that's not the point. That, combined with the hacking, the shooting, the driving, and so on, made this one of the most hyped games of 2014. May 2014 rolls around, and it turns out that one of the most hyped games of the year, if not of the decade at that point, turned into one of the biggest disappointments of that year, or of the decade up until that point. In what would later become Ubisoft standard, the game released broken, buggy, fucking shit, underwhelming, the story was ass, and of course, riddled to the core of the bone with false advertisement. The graphical fidelity showcased in the trailers for Watch Dogs was actually just that, graphical fidelity for trailers. You could still activate that graphical fidelity if you played on PC and fucked around with the game itself, but that would lead to a whole host of other issues, one of them being the fact that there were nearly 0 NPCs in the entire game. Ubisoft knew this the entire time, but they still pushed out the game anyway because fuck you, give me money, except at that time, people didn't actually expect to be swindled that way. It wasn't the first example of its kind. Killzone 2 and Aliens Colonial Marines had already set that bar, but it was a relatively new thing, and the time it took for Ubisoft to fix all of the bugs, put out DLC, and so on and so forth, and actually make the game halfway decent, was more than the time it took for people to be outraged, sick of the game, and moved on to something else. Remember that for a minute, because now we're gonna move on to Assassin's Creed Unity later in that year in 2014. After the release of Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag in 2013 to universal appraise, Ubisoft came out with their next-gen version, but that being Assassin's Creed Unity, which, as everybody knows, was not only a painfully buggy piece of shit, it was also a massive controversy at the time. Yes, believe it or not, back in the day, games releasing buggy wasn't exactly a norm. Shit like this and this wasn't exactly seen as excusable back in the day, and Ubisoft had to work for ages to try to fix the game. Moreover, the game was also seen as a downgrade when compared to Black Flag, because Black Flag allowed you to do a lot of shit, and AC Unity seemed to be trying to replicate what Assassin's Creed 2 did, but more fancy. It's not a bad game now, but it's an easy skip if you're interested in the Assassin's Creed franchise. Ironically enough, the previous gen version, Assassin's Creed Rogue, was actually much better. One thing I will say though, before we move on to the next game, is that Assassin's Creed up until this point, while it took a lot of historical liberties, you know, the whole assassins and a war across time thing, the games did try to at least portray the time periods in which they were in somewhat accurately. A lot of people are only becoming aware of this now, but Ubisoft actually did used to care a lot about historical accuracy, down to the point where they removed a crossbow because it wasn't accurate enough. Then in 2015, Assassin's Creed Syndicate came out. In case you're keeping track, yes, that was a year later. While it was objectively better than Assassin's Creed Unity, it wasn't that much of an important game. Sure, you can go and play it now and have a decent amount of fun, but one thing I remember about Assassin's Creed Syndicate is feeling like Ubisoft wasn't giving that much of a shit about characters anymore and about assassinating anymore. Sure, a lot of the missions were fun, the game looked good, and it was nice to go around, but it just didn't feel like Assassin's Creed that much to me. Something about how the characters behaved and how characters were portrayed just seemed off to me.
My god, this is Michel Rouge's vault.
Michael Rourke's vault? It can't be.
You have no idea who that is, do you?
I wonder if this is gonna come back later. But hey, if you want to play it now and with all the DLCs, like, sure, go ahead. I mean, you could spend your money on worse things. You could spend money on Fallout 76. But yeah, it's okay. Like, yeah, as Ubisoft games go in the 2010s and 2020s, it's okay. It's okay. Oh, by the way, I almost forgot. Rainbow Six Siege released that same year, 2015, December 1st. It was marketed as a serious PvP/PvE competitive SWAT game. Huh? Are we sure Rainbow Six Siege actually released? Okay, sorry, I made a mistake in the script. Rainbow Six Siege never actually released. I wonder when it's gonna come out. Then we move on to 2016. 2016 was a busy year for Ubisoft because they had one very, very hyped game that everybody was looking forward to, and that was gonna be revolutionary. But first, Watch Dogs 2. Now, one of the things you can actually give Watch Dogs 1 a lot of credit for is that it took itself seriously, and after fixes, patches, and mods, you can actually go and play Watch Dogs 1 and have a decent amount of fun with it. So, after 2 years of development, which used to be fucking standard, by the way, Watch Dogs 2 is gonna come out. It's gonna be great. What the fuck do I even say to this? 2016 really was the most eye-opening year for me because seeing this dramatic shift in tone told me really all I needed to know about what a lot of Ubisoft games were gonna be. Now, contrary to what you might be thinking, Watch Dogs 2 isn't actually a bad game. It offered a neat sandbox that people could play around in. The problem was that the tone of the game was absolutely ass. It was such a dramatic shift that I couldn't bring myself to actually buy the game, and thank goodness I didn't, because the game, while it's still good, it just really is good because it's a fun sandbox to run around and do things in. I was interested in the more serious tone of Watch Dogs 1, and Watch Dogs 2 was such a split from that, and the story was just, like, what even happened in Watch Dogs 2? That, while it may be a fun game in and of itself, a lot of aspects from it are simply too different from what I expected. But a lot of people were ready to excuse that. They were ready to excuse it because the game itself was fun to play. This isn't gonna come back to bite people in the ass later, I'm sure of it. So there was nothing to worry about, and Ubisoft could be perfectly excused for everything that they had done prior to release. What bad did they do prior to release? What the fuck? The fucking pre-order charts. Believe it or not, back in the day, pre-order charts didn't used to be something like this. They just weren't a thing. I know corporate shills are going to keep fucking excusing it now. They're going to excuse it. Well, everybody does it. Roll with it. But no, I didn't roll with this back in the day. A lot of people didn't roll with this back in the day, but because people were starting to be super mega shills and the standards were starting to drop, people just rolled with the existence of these fucking charts for pre-orders as if any of this shit is gonna run out. Not only, but in case you paid attention to your screen, you'd notice that this isn't just a pre-order chart, it's a different bundle chart. Watch Dogs 1 got absolutely shit-canned for trying to do something like this, and rightfully so. These fucking bundle charts are money-grubbing to the fucking nth degree. But no, on the launch of Watch Dogs 2, you had the privilege of paying $130 for the Watch Dogs 2 San Francisco edition, which didn't include a season pass, unlike in the gold edition, the cheaper one. And the things contained within it, in case you don't know, cost less today than they did on launch. And no, there was no discount for digital versions. You shouldn't be surprised by that. And you might be saying, oh well, Enclave Emily, that's obvious. As time passes, things get cheaper. Yeah, that's part of the point. The fact that a lot of people were willing to pay $130 for shit that they'd be able to pawn for much less is somewhat ridiculous for a franchise that literally launched on broken promises, but the real point of this, and the real point I was talking about this for so long, was to give you time to notice a specific pattern, specifically in the graph that has been on screen this entire time. You might have noticed that the San Francisco edition does not include the season pass because a fucking season pass for a single player game. I'm not even gonna talk about that too much. It's it's normalized now, and if you don't get it at this point, you're a lost cause. But it also doesn't include a lot of other things. Why? Because this fucking chart of bundles was made specifically to get people to double dip. Even buying the most expensive version, that being the collector's case Return of DeadSec, which cost $160 US, you are not actually getting all of the content available regardless of which version you buy. Meaning that if you are a collector and are interested in Watch Dogs and Watch Dog related merch and collecting a Watch Dogs related merch, you would have to not single, not double, but triple fucking dip in order to get everything. Paying upwards of $350 US, if memory serves 400, if you wanted to get everything on day one. Jesus fucking Christ, I want you to understand how ridiculous this was for the time. We were already seeing publishers and devs become greedy motherfuckers back then, but this was something different. 400 fucking US if you wanted to get everything on day one. Naturally, a lot of people were smart, and I put that smart in gigantic quote marks, and didn't triple dip, but a lot of people did, and a lot of people who didn't still excused it because game fun. If the game is good, who gives a shit if you have to pay more than half the minimum wage in some European countries in order to get everything in a game? This isn't gonna get any worse now, is it? Oh goodness gracious, I forgot. Tom Clancy's The Division. I want you to copy-paste everything I said about Watch Dogs 1 and translate it to Tom Clancy's The Division. Hyped to fuck, scripted and misleading trailers as fuck, and disappointing on launch as a motherfucker. Let's start off with the pre-launch. If you pre-order Tom Clancy's The Division 1, for starters, you would get items in the game. That's right, the thing you can do to secure a copy for yourself, that's what a pre-order is supposed to be, getting a copy for yourself in the fear of missing out in a day and age when you can just go fucking download. Some of what you would get would be simple items, meaning that if you pre-ordered the game, you would have an advantage over people who didn't pre-order it. Not much of an advantage, but enough of an advantage. There was also that shit of get early access to the beta, as if a beta even exists a few months before release. It's not a beta, it's a demo. It was obvious back then to a lot of people, not enough apparently, and it's apparently still not obvious to a lot of people, so there you go. But even still, was the game good when it released? Go fucking figure, of course it wasn't. It's Ubisoft. The game on launch had massive server issues and insanely long queues. Like Watch Dogs 1, the game's visuals were downgraded to fuck when compared to earlier trailers. There was a severe lack of content, and because of that lack of content, the game's missions were just copy-pastes of one another. The enemies were bullet sponges, because remember, they had to scale it in line with their desire for a fucking live service, which didn't exactly have a name yet. The Dark Zone game mode was unbalanced as fuck, because players with high levels would always dominate players with low levels, simply because they do more damage than anybody else. And the promised companion app before launch, which they teamed as revolutionary, where you'd be able to help your friends via an app on your phone, was just shut off and cancelled before launch. They were too busy selling you a season pass for a game with a mind-numbing content drought to actually get such a feature to work. Reminder, Battlefield 4 already had something like that. And in case you don't know, Battlefield 4 came 2013. For some reason, in the original recording, I said 2014. Sorry, I'm retarded. Oh, and if you played on PC, there were a bunch of cheaters in that game. Not that Ubisoft ever gave a shit. Because some cheats, and I know this for a fact, never fucking updated after launch and are still functioning to this day. And if you think that we've reached peak shit, this is fucking heaven compared to what's coming up next. And you might be wondering, Enclave Emily, you sound out of breath and lightheaded. Because I am out of breath and lightheaded. Everything I've spoken of thus far, right, has been something that I have spoken of in my previous videos about Fallout and shit like that, and Starfield and so on, you get the point. And it's shit that people are still defending to this day. But I decided that I would expunge all of my fucking anger right now because I wanted you to understand how ridiculous it is so I wouldn't have to spend so much time on this shit later on, because you are going to start understanding the pattern, because now we are going to go over 7 fucking years of Ubi slop shit. And you, I hope, are going to understand my frustration calling this out since this fucking time period, and realizing how fucking obnoxious it is that some people still don't get this all these years later, and some people still defend this all these years later. Turn that pattern recognition part of your brain on, because we're gonna get into this. You ready? 2017, Assassin's Creed Origins comes out. It's a fucking bastardization of history, and started to make health bars more prevalent in the game about, you know, assassinating people. Meaning that if you weren't in stealth, and believe me, you weren't a lot of the time, the fucking level design started to go to shit. Well, I hope you like pressing the attack button for 10 minutes straight, because that's what you'd be doing. And you better get fucking used to doing it, because to progress in the game, you need to level up, meaning that if you weren't a specific level, you simply couldn't continue with the game. Were you actively good at the game and managed to get to a specific point in the game without reaching a certain level? Fuck you. Moreover, they started introducing microtransactions and loot boxes. That's right, microtransactions and loot boxes in a fucking single-player game. But don't worry, you can actually earn it in-game, some people said to defend this practice. Yeah, you can earn it in-game if you connect to the internet to get a daily quest. So you can then grind away to get XP to increase your level and get a chance of getting that fucking cosmetic which they paywalled behind the fucking loot box in the first place. But don't worry guys, gamers won. Ubisoft listened to criticism. They didn't have 7 different pre-order bundles, they had 4. Fucking 4. Should we punish them for being money-hungry retards? No, 100 million in fucking revenue. Far Cry 5, same shit, and honestly, I want to pretend that game doesn't exist, so thank you, I'm moving on. Right after I get down from this radio tower. Tom Clancy's The Division 2. Well, if you remember what I said about The Division 1 and Watch Dogs, you already know what I'm gonna say. There were downgrades, visual downgrades, again. Servers were fucked on release. It was microtransaction heavy. By the way, this was yet another paid game, not a fucking free-to-play game, another paid game, a fucking live service, go figure. And reviewers were embargoed, meaning that they couldn't put out their reviews until after launch. Meaning that Ubisoft knew how egregious it was. Ubisoft knew the state the game was in, but they decided to shut reviewers up so players would just fall for the same shit again and get them as much money as they could. How would they get this money? Well, through 7 pre-order bundles and different editions, 2 of which were console bundles, so it's fine, whatever, where they again asked for your left kidney and an eyeball in order to get all the content, including one edition which cost 250 fucking US dollars, temporary pay-to-win buffs if you fucking pre-ordered the game and got one of these special editions compared to people who didn't do that, and while the game wasn't as fucking repetitive as The Division 1, it was basically as repetitive as The Division 1. And don't worry if you're a Division 2 fan, they're still putting out content to this day and it's still buggy as shit. Once again, did the consumers punish these people? Did they punish these bad practices? Did they punish 6 fucking years of money-grubbing, busted fucking content just to fucking suck your wallet dry? Well, The Division is now $1 billion franchise. Fucking fantastic. Then we get to Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Oh boy, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I hope you like grinding in order to just progress in a story-based single-player game, because that's what you're gonna be doing for like 90% of your fucking playtime. Even more than Assassin's Creed Origins somehow, and believe it or not, they haven't even reached their peak, but we haven't gotten there yet. The game released broken, busted, and full of microtransactions because of course it wouldn't be Ubisoft if that wasn't the case. But I'm talking more about Assassin's Creed Valhalla now because this was 2020 when wokeness really started to come into a more common debate, yet not fully reaching its peak. Because this is when Ubisoft started to become a lot more blatant when it came to political agendas and revisionism, turning Vikings into good guys and, let's not forget,
No one has really been able to match me.
I'm probably not going to be able to match you either.
No, of course not, because you're a stupid Nick.
Why did they do this? Did they do this because they wanted to tell a story of their own in a world of their own? No, it was to push for diversity and inclusivity, because of course, we love the fact that the franchise who once upon a time removed a fucking crossbow for historical accuracy decides to push a fucking failed ideology that's on its way out because of inclusivity and political messaging that's only not obvious to those fucking lobotomized twice over. I'm just gonna say it here now for the few people that disagree with me that actively stayed up until this point. I don't actually care if someone is white or black or not. That was never and will never be the point. The point is that I don't want activists to be changing my fucking game for their fucking purposes. It would be fucking ridiculous if it was done the other way around, and it's quite literally as simple as that. Thank you. Then we had Watch Dogs Legion. Oh boy, Watch Dogs Legion. What to say about Watch Dogs Legion? It's, remember what I said about Watch Dogs 2 being unable to take itself seriously and being hard to take seriously in general? Well, Ubisoft decided to make a game that catered to the average IQ of people who still bought their games, and it paid off about as well as you'd expect, and that payoff was, not seeing a fucking Watch Dogs game since the release of Watch Dogs Legion. The game, on top of that, was buggy and was after your wallet more than Vosh was after a miner, so there you go. It was also really bad as a game in general, whereas Watch Dogs 2 had one good part of it, that being the fact that it functioned as a decent sandbox to run around in. Watch Dogs Legion couldn't even do that. And thank goodness for the fact that I hope to Christ I will never have to see this franchise ever again in my life. Then we had a few franchises that were once good and are now terrible, such as Far Cry 6 and Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Extraction. They were both terrible, I don't want to talk about them. And then we get to 2023. It was here that Ubisoft started panicking, where they started to realize that they were not going exactly the right way. They realized they were bleeding new customers and that they were starting to bleed old customers, except for the whales that still kept purchasing their products over and over. So they came up with Assassin's Creed Mirage. In case you aren't aware, the marketing around Assassin's Creed Mirage was almost exclusively a return to form for Assassin's Creed. Hey, we're like the old games back in the day. Effectively admitting that they had virtually destroyed the Assassin's Creed franchise up until this point, and they tried to be nicer and actually cater to fans for once in their life, and the results were actually mixed. The game wasn't bad, but it simply wasn't enough for a lot of people. It simply wasn't enough to get them to drop, say, Assassin's Creed 4, Assassin's Creed 2, Assassin's Creed 3, and sink dozens if not hundreds of hours into that. So yeah, looks good. Ubisoft is returning to form. Just kidding, they were still selling digital content and paywalling certain content behind pre-orders and special edition upgrades. But it's okay, Ubisoft is a small indie dev team and they need to make money somehow after all. But let's not forget, it's 2023, and in 2023 Avatar came out, and it was everything wrong with Ubisoft games put into one. Boring worlds, boring repetitive missions, money-hungry practices, relentless padding, grinding, tedious shite, and of course political messaging. That, incidentally, was so obnoxious that a lot of the reviews I saw for Avatar were people saying that they sided with the bad guys. Not because they agreed with what the bad guys were doing, but because the supposedly good guys were so obnoxious, they were cheering on the bad guys winning or shooting the good guys. Those being the natives of the planet of the world. I don't actually care about the Avatar franchise, so there's that. And finally, we get to the year of 2024. The year of 2024. 10 years after Watch Dogs and Assassin's Creed Unity came out. 10 years of misery, disappointment, empty wallets, and games, rather should I say, products made by the worst people in the world, the French. How much lower can they go? Well, really fucking low as it turns out, because it was in this year that Ubisoft decided to coin the term quadruple A and instantly became a meme for it. You see, Skull and Bones came out, and to this day I don't understand how this game was hyped. Apparently, it was in development hell for 10 fucking years, but was still decently hyped. Not not as hyped as a lot of games I've been mentioning up until this point, but was still decently hyped. It was the pirate game for all fans of Assassin's Creed 4 pirate ship combat. It was a pirate game for the people that wanted a pirate game since Assassin's Creed 4. I wanted to make a joke here, but the shtick is getting old. You know exactly what happened with Skull and Bones. If you remember every single controversy I have mentioned in this video, if you have been paying attention to everything I've been saying up until this point, imagine all of that in one single game. Well, almost all of that, but we'll get to it. Constant attempts to get you to pre-order and double dip, check. Microtransactions, check. Live service slop elements on top of a full-priced game, check. Broken promises and outright false advertising, check. Simplification of every mechanic, check. Tedious, repetitive, outright copy-paste objectives, check. But for once, the pattern was broken and the profits were actually not hundreds of millions or billions, but were in fact losses totaling in the hundreds of millions, along with the permanent destruction of the Ubisoft brand, and people for once wising up and deciding that maybe, just maybe, the game was ass and people should call it out. I have to say, I was actually amazed. I had never seen this. I did not see this one coming. Another thing I did not see coming, believe it or not, was the next game later that year, Star Wars Outlaws. You see, the nothing burger that was Assassin's Creed Mirage, the years of failures by Ubisoft, and the absolute failure that was Skull and Bones seemed to have been enough to get people to start wising up to Ubisoft and their shitty practices, meaning that for the second time in a row, Star Wars Outlaws was another massive failure. Of course, Star Wars Outlaws suffered from just about everything that I've mentioned up until this point in the video, but, and I could not fucking believe it, people, for once, did not fall for it. So imagine the size of the popcorn box in my hands when the controversies surrounding Assassin's Creed Shadows started popping up. I don't want to make this video 1 hour long, but believe me, I very easily could if I were to go over all the controversies related to Assassin's Creed Shadows. Fuck, I could make this video 2 hours long if I had gone more in depth. You had managerial controversies related to the fact that one of the directors of the game was outright saying that he wanted to hire people based on race and was a massive racist, which, in case you don't know, hiring people based on race is literally a crime, with very, very few exceptions. You had deceptive marketing and messaging, such as the game shifting release dates multiple times, which, they won't admit it, but it was them trying to find the driest period possible in order to release the game because they were really getting desperate and Assassin's Creed Shadows was their last chance, to almost being fucking banned in Japan, because at the heart of it, activists masquerading as game developers don't actually understand the people they're pandering to, or allegedly pandering to. And there's another controversy, I forget what it is. No, never mind. There isn't any other controversy. Anyway, on to the gameplay. To the surprise of absolutely nobody, the gameplay is pretty shite. On top of what some people have legitimately tried to convince me are features and not bugs at this point. Indirectly, because defending shit like this is getting really ridiculous at this point. The game, to a degree, actually is that classic Assassin's Creed in Japan that a lot of people have asked for. Ubisoft actually toned down the health bars. Grinding doesn't seem to be a major issue, with the exception of grinding your teeth at your performance that you get on PC. And holy shit, there's boats. Let's get on one of them. How's the stealth in this game? Okay, so that's it then. You know, it has bugs, sure. It has terrible AI. It has 2 hours of credits due to outsourcing to India. But could it really be? Could this really be Ubisoft's actual comeback? It can improve. Could this actually be Ubisoft recovering? Could this really be the Assassin's Creed game we've been waiting for so long in medieval Japan? I mean, there's nothing else negative to talk about. Wait a minute. Oh, yeah!
River. Agreed.
All chirp. We have our first chirp of the night, ladies and gentlemen, and of course it's from some nigga.
I don't know how Ubisoft managed to outdo literal government-funded woke propaganda video games in the woke department. Yet here we are, good old Yasuke. In case you aren't aware, Yasuke was the one black guy in medieval Japanese history, probably in all of Japanese history outside of modern tourism, let's be completely honest, who was a slave sold to the Japanese as a servant by the Portuguese, I'm so sorry, Japan, who was only really valuable in Japan because a black guy, and I don't mean to be racist here, was seen as exotic at the time. Ubisoft, through an absolute clusterfucking of history, for the sake of pushing a diverse, modern inclusivity woke propaganda message, turned just some servant who was sold over, and turned him into, and I can't believe this is actually real, quote, the greatest samurai in Japanese history. No, you didn't hear that wrong. You can be declared the greatest samurai in Japanese history. They made him gay because why wouldn't you, I suppose? And followed that up with what I can only describe as the most generic fucking trying to speak English voice I think I have ever heard. I mention all of this not only because it's an absolute bastardization of history, but because everything I've mentioned up until this point and things I am going to mention in a second make me believe that this game is legitimately racist. Oh, you didn't expect to hear that from me, did you? But yes, that's the problem with woke games. They end up being the exact fucking thing they claim to fight against. All for the sake of pushing a bullshit diversity agenda that doesn't work and that nobody outside of a few hacktivists like. But before I explain that, I just want you to understand how fucking immersion breaking it is to be the literal one black guy in Japanese history in a game which is part of a franchise about blending into crowds. Not only were samurai revered in Japan and people just bowed in the presence of samurai, it takes mind-boggling levels of delusion to be able to not have your immersion broken when you are the literal one black guy in all of Japan, dressed up as a fucking samurai no less, which was also very eye-catching. Meaning that even if you are in favor of inclusivity and erasure of other people's fucking history, you cannot be fully immersed into the game, this middle finger to the entire country of Japan of a game, because you are made to believe that nobody can track you down when you are the most identifiable person in the entire country. And even if you somehow can look past that, it's not like the AI is particularly smart, and simply snaking around their feet is enough to get them to lose sight of you. And even if you can look past that, this...
I hope you aren't easily chilled. Do you think someone might see us?
Maybe.
I don't give a fuck where your orientation or ideology is, this is just fucking cringe no matter how you look at it. What's next? Are we gonna get a Smurf-sized rice pickers representation of Japanese people in this inclusive video game?
Resentment can grow quietly without much warning after a storm. Mushrooms can too.
Okay, never mind, I guess. Assassin's Creed Shadows is based and you should all buy it. But if you thought that was a peak representation of what woke people actually believe, if you thought that this was a peak representation of woke ideology, I point you to the final boss fight in Assassin's Creed Shadows. If you're doing something else while listening to this, stop doing it for a second, because it took me saying it 6 times to myself to actually believe what I was seeing. The final boss fight of Assassin's Creed Shadows is Yasuke, a man from Mozambique originally, beating up a Portuguese man in Japan, a white guy, by the way, in an enclosed environment where you can just knock him against the wall over and over to cheese the boss fight, to the tune of a hip-hop song sung in Swahili with Japanese instruments accompanying them, in which the song translates to the Swahili words for "We slaughter them." Let me me repeat that in case you didn't fully grasp what I just said. The final boss fight of the ninja game set in medieval Japan is a black guy who was previously declared the greatest samurai in the history of Japan, murdering a white guy to the tune of a hip-hop song with Japanese instruments, sung in African Swahili, and the song's lyrics are about slaughtering them. What the fuck? You know, I get weird glances at university when people start to realize that I am actually not in favor of diversity and diversification ideology and all that shit. And honestly, if they ever ask me about it, I think I'm just gonna show them this shit, because this is absolutely fucking insane. I legitimately could not believe what I was seeing, and it was so unfathomably egregious on top of everything I already said about this game, that when I started seeing tweets about this shit, I legitimately believed them to be lies. This is the endpoint of the diversity is a strength ideology. It really is. When you leave unironic racists legitimately baffled at what they're fucking hearing, not me by the way, it's just a character, but when you leave actual racists on the internet legitimately baffle internet racists as to how racist you are being, then I think that the problem isn't the chuds who just don't like the darkies in the video game, and maybe, just maybe, it might be a problem with how fucked your perception of the world is, and how unironically venomous your ideology is. By the way, did you notice that you can bang the woman who fathered multiple Japanese emperors in this fucking game? Yeah, meaning that every Japanese emperor technically has the N-word pack. Any virtues this game has, and believe me, it actually does have some, went out the fucking window the second it was turned into this shit. Ubisoft did not see a single problem with any of this shit up until people started calling it out. They saw their buggy, busted, disrespectful piece of shit of a game that runs about as well as a body-positive activist on a 100-meter dash on PC, and thought that this would be their fucking ace in the hole. And when it didn't land, believe it or not, go figure, leave it to the modern gaming journalists to absolutely just copy-paste the lines they were given in a fucking email and try to tell you that Assassin's Creed Shadows is actually one of the greatest games of all time, and that it sold gangbusters. I'm gonna tell you the truth, it fucking didn't. Ubisoft lost money on it, because even if you multiply all alleged sales, this game cost hundreds of millions to make, and that's not including the fucking advertising costs. Ubisoft, despite not being the worst of the modern gaming publishers, that throne goes to fucking Riot Games, Tencent, and EA, somehow managed to encapsulate literally everything wrong with modern gaming in one game. And at this point, if you still want to defend practices like this, if you still believe that Ubisoft is actually owning the chuddies who just don't like diversity, and if you still are one of the fucking idiots who thinks that practices like this can be defended, and who still want to trust modern publishers and pre-order their games, I'm sorry to tell you, and you might call me toxic, but do so if you feel like it, you are a lost cause. And if you are one of the people who was smart and didn't waste money on this crap, leave a Japan emoji next to a star emoji in the comments below. Thank you very much. Also, become a YouTube member if you want even more content, including edgy stuff that I don't post publicly. Thank you.